The second edition of the Pittsburgh Current podcast, the fourth edition of our print issue. I'm Charlie Deach, editor, publisher of the Pittsburgh Current. I have a guest with me today. I'm not quite sure how to introduce this guy. He's currently a political consultant, but he used to be a former professional wrestler. I guess he's still a former professional wrestler, and he's dying to give me a chair shot. Mitch Cates. Mitch, thanks for coming in.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for having me. And I warn you, the last time somebody brought me on and asked me to talk about wrestling, they got popped. So
yeah,
be careful.
Yeah, Mitch is he saw that chair and I think his mouth started to water a little bit, so I'm a little concerned, but I have taken a bump or two in my day, so we'll see where the day takes us. Mitch works on he's working on a few campaigns, but one of the campaigns that he's working on, and we'll talk about a few of them, but one of the campaigns Mitch is working on, it actually sort of has a wrestling tie to it. Mitch is working on the campaign of Daniel Smith, and Daniel's running against my good friend Daryl Metcalfe up in Butler County. If you don't know my background with Mr. Metcalfe, just Google Charlie Deach and Daryl Metcalfe, and I'm sure you'll find some interesting content. Also, if you have a question, submit that on Facebook, and we'll get to it. But so Daniel Smith he's an openly gay candidate running against Daryl Metcalfe, an openly homophobic legislator. So I'll let Mitch talk a little bit about Daniel's story. Well, I'll let you talk about it now. So, Mitch, tell me a little bit about Daniel's campaign and tell me a little bit about how you hooked up with him.
So, thanks, Charlie. And I'm glad to be here, by the way.
Thank you.
You're doing good stuff.
Thanks.
So, Daniel reached out to me late last year when I was still with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I was the political director. And he said, listen, I live in this district. And I, like many residents here, I'm fed up and somebody needs to challenge this guy and I want to be that guy. So I said, okay, tell me about yourself. So he gave me some information about who he was. He was from the district. He's actually in banking,
Right.
Worked his way up the food chain. And he also interjected that he happened to be an openly gay man.
Mm-hmm.
So that sent light bulbs off to me, and I'll explain that in a minute.
Right.
Which is, I know your
Yes.
mouth is watering about that too. So we'll get there.
Your foot's on the mic stand.
Okay. Sorry.
Jesus, Mitch.
I'm
Bring you
sorry.
on.
I
The
wrecked
first
the
guest I've
joint
ever had on my
already.
podcast.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. Was I doing it to the beat? A good beat though. So when Daniel gave me his background, and it's hard to not know who Daryl Metcalfe
Right.
is. There are so many adjectives that you can plug into that
Yeah.
guy's name, and since this is a family show, we'll keep it clean. But openly obnoxious would be a
Right.
good one.
Right.
So anyhow,
Openly straight. He had made that perfectly clear.
thou dost protest too much.
Yes. Openly to a fault, some would
Yeah.
say.
But we got together, and I had left the party and started our firm Think Big Campaigns, and
Yeah.
he's one of our clients. And so Daniel is running a very strong, aggressive race for that seat. What's important to know about it is he is surrounded by people that are as equally as passionate as he is, of all parties. This is not
Yeah.
Democrat versus Republican. This is one individual against another individual. One individual has been in office for 20 years, and another individual that feels like his community is being, frankly, left behind.
Right.
And so that's the kind of campaign that we're running. It's a very door-to-door
Right.
campaign where they knock Democratic doors. We've been knocking Republican doors for a month now.
And the fact is, you can't win that district without also courting Republicans and getting their support. I mean, it's a majority Republican district, and so
It's definitely one of those classic gerrymandered
Yeah.
districts. It's 2-to-1 Republican registration. But a lot of Daniel's supporters, the ones that are knocking doors, are registered Republicans who everybody has their own reasons why. Some people are showing up because they're just flat out embarrassed by this guy and what he does and what he doesn't do.
Right.
And so it's a very interesting campaign, and people are working really hard. And the good news is that most of the feedback that we get on a day-to-day basis is people are ready for that change,
Right.
and they're open to, and they're not looking at it with partisan
Right.
lenses. The only person that's looking at it in partisan lenses and homophobic lenses
Right.
is Daryl Metcalfe himself.
And we've talked about this. The only person who really mentions the fact that Daniel is gay is Daryl Metcalfe. Correct?
That's correct.
And I've heard some stories from multiple sources, and I know that they haven't had much face-to-face time. But I've heard several times that when they have met face-to-face, Daryl hasn't even had the decency to shake Daniel's hand. That's sort of the level of.
That's true. And not only has he not had the decency to like shake Daniel's hand and say, "Hey, good luck" or
Right.
whatever, he's also stiff-armed.
Right.
People that are just residents that are helping Daniel or
Right.
supporting of Daniel, and they've also tried to engage the representative in a conversation, and he will not do that.
Right.
But of course, I think you brought this out in him, that he has said openly that he only will speak
Right.
to Republicans because they're his only constituents.
Yeah, there's this thing, as journalists, we always, even though we all know it, like you can trace back the record and you can look at the fact that he's never advanced a Democratic bill out of his committee. And you say, that he appears to be, he's seemingly an obstructionist. Well, he was like, to hell with that. I am an obstructionist. He
Right.
literally used those, basically said, I won't pass anything that's not a Republican bill. He won't, he won't even consider or look at anything else that doesn't come. And that doesn't, even in the most partisan of systems, that's just sort of unheard of, to not even pretend to care about the other parties.
He's taken
measures.
he's taken that bridge to a way
Yeah.
beyond a bridge too far.
Right.
I don't know of any other elected official that I know of
Right.
who's plenty of people do it,
Yeah.
and they do it discreetly and quietly or
Right.
sneakily or whatever it is.
Right.
But he's blatant and right out
Yeah.
front with it. And for those people that care about the Constitution, for example,
Right.
and the roots and history of our country was founded on bipartisanism,
Right.
or compromise. Compromise is the
exactly,
word I'm looking
exactly.
for. And this is a guy who refuses to be that,
Right.
let that happen.
Yeah, and you guys have gotten a lot of support. Obviously, you've gotten support. You're seeing support in the district, but you're also getting support from across the state because, Daryl Metcalfe, is technically a Butler County politician, but he goes well beyond being a Butler County politician. And you guys have seen that, right, in some of your support and your fundraising as well. I would
Yeah,
say.
without a doubt, because he's in a leadership position,
Yeah.
which in and of itself is a sad testament to where we are in the state.
Right.
But what he does impacts the entire Commonwealth of
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, not just Butler County. The irony is he's done more to allow things to pass that help other parts of Pennsylvania and not his own home district.
Yeah.
He refuses to send funding to help widen Freedom Road.
Right.
And everybody that lives in that district knows that traffic is crazy. You can't go to the grocery store. A 10-minute drive is a 40-minute drive
Right.
on any given day. So while he's doing things to not help his own district, the decisions that he's making are hurting the entire Commonwealth. When he shuts down bills because a Democrat touched it,
Right.
or most recently when he shut the process down for the whole fair districting process,
Correct.
which was a huge bipartisan effort
Right.
that people on both sides were working diligently on, and they were actually getting somewhere, and it showed some progress for the whole Commonwealth. He shut it down, and so that's why people all over Pennsylvania are concerned about this guy, are supporting Daniel. Some are supporting financially. Some are showing up to help with canvassing.
Right.
Some are volunteering to do postcard writing parties.
That's amazing, and it's like I said, I have no love loss for Daryl. Daryl's not my favorite person, as we all know.
And you're not alone.
You're right, and that's the thing. It's definitely I'm not an army of one when it comes to the anti-Daryl campaign. And it's weird though. It's he really is a special kind of politician in that I know that there are more moderate members of his own party who, it doesn't help them because there are times that they do need, well, not many times they need Democratic support, especially now. But I think that it's guys like Daryl who are eventually going to end up swaying the state legislature, the House in particular, maybe at least right-sizing it a little bit. Number one, getting rid of the extreme gerrymandering of the districts. But then, if you can, get people to sort of turn on these extremes, I guess of either party. But I always say, like, if you look at the extremes of each party, look at the extremes of the right, and what's the worst case scenario? Well, we're all marching in lockstep, and the people who don't fit into their don't fit their bill are going to end up, who knows? The worst thing that happens, the worst case scenario in our party or in the Democratic Party on the far left is, people get help who need it. Anybody can, you can exercise your civil rights. You can have control of your own body. You can marry any person that you want. I mean, those are the extremes. So
shame
that's
on
the
you,
extreme,
Charlie,
how
for
dare
pushing
I
promote that
how
kind
dare
of
I want help for
what
people who
on
can't help
earth is wrong with
themselves?
you?
Or I know. I'm just.
Yeah. But to your point though, I'm sure that there are many members of his own party that are in the legislature that are quietly with their fingers crossed, hoping that we pull this off. There are, and you see this out in the Southeast. There are many members, or soon to be former members, who have decided not to run anymore because it's become so extreme that they're done banging their heads against the wall, and that's happening at a national level. There's many members of Congress that said, "I'm done." Right, because of what's happening at a national level, but here at a statewide level, it's the same problem. And so those moderate voices that have been working with their Democratic allies at the state legislature are going away. And so it is becoming, an extreme on one side, and we'll see what happens, as we move forward into the next couple of years.
Absolutely. So let's just kind of to sort of. I think it's important to tell this story. So you said earlier that it clicked with you that Daniel was an openly gay candidate, that Daniel was in banking, and that Daniel was running against a homophobic, entrenched Republican. So but you had this exact same experience elsewhere in your career. Let's talk a little bit about that. And this is where the wrestling connection also comes in.
Well, of course. This is like deja vu all over again.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So while Daniel was explaining, kind of giving me his background and all that, that light bulb moment that happened brought me back to a few years ago. Actually, I hate to say it, it was like 11 years ago. I met a young man in his mid-30s who was also, had never been a candidate, was in the financial industry, was a financial planner, and that he planned on running against an entrenched incumbent for a seat on the county commission. And this was down in Florida in Hillsborough County. And by the way, he was a gay man, and he was going to run as an openly gay candidate. And the incumbent was, and I believe that this is a professional wrestling audience. I'm surrounded by it. I feel like I'm in my old basement. Was Brian Blair, or to those in the know, B. Brian Blair. Brian Blair was on the county commission. The significance of that race and why this was an important one for the candidate whose name is Kevin Beckner. So for those of you that want to do your research, you can type in Kevin Beckner versus Brian Blair. You can type in my name and Kevin Beckner, and you will see the stories that came out of that race. But Brian Blair was on a county commission that 2 years prior to Kevin stepping up, by a vote of 6-1, that county commission banned gay pride in the county. They banned gay pride books in the public library, which just seems absurd. This was in the 2000s, not the 1950s, right? And so Kevin was a citizen who just felt like, this is gone. This is not the community that I live in. And so he stepped up to challenge. And I worked with Kevin for 2 years on that race. And for a good year and a half, almost every single Democratic leader, former, current elected, members of the media would also say to me, there's no way Some people, like off the record, would say, why would you let Kevin do this? He's going to get killed.
Right.
They're going to destroy him. And my opinion was, at that time, I stubbornly, and people were mad at me for being so stubborn, I insisted that Kevin Beckner was going to win the race because he was running as an openly gay man.
Right.
You know, and his opinion was, you know, if he was going to be transparent and honest with in government as an elected official, he needed to be transparent and honest about who he was. And it really shouldn't matter who he loved. It should matter about the issues that he cared about and that the issues that he would fight for. So we started out with a small group of like 3 or 4 people sitting around his kitchen table, and that kept growing and that kept growing. And then all of a sudden, you know, we were getting support from both sides of the aisle.
Right.
And this was a 2008 election. This was pre-Tea Party, but there were many people that showed up every day to help us who eventually, you know, were part of the Tea Party revolution. Right. You know, everybody came together for that common cause that guy was a problem and that guy needed to go. And it wasn't really a partisan. It was not a partisan campaign. And you know, long story short, there's some interesting articles if you find them about that race. But we beat that guy.
Right. And
we beat that guy. We beat him bad. And Brian wasn't happy about it. So there were 2 funny things that happened. I had never met Brian. I used to watch him on TV.
Right, sure.
I thought he was a great shooter. He was, you know, some of my favorite matches were, you know, Brian. I think there was a match, Brian Blair against Paul Orndorff, I remember. It was a great shoot. But anyways, so I met Brian. Kevin and I were waiting outside. It was like the Labor Hall, and we were going in to meet with the Labor Council in Hillsborough. And Brian was in there asking for their support, and he was like wicked anti-labor.
Yeah.
But he gave it a shot.
Right.
And so when he came out, he did what Daryl Metcalfe doesn't have the guts to do.
Wow.
He came over to Kevin. He said, "Kevin, nice to meet you. You know,
Right.
good luck." Right. And then he looked over at me and he's like, "Jason, right?"
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we gave the kayfabe handshake, and you know, hey, good luck.
Yeah.
And so then fast forward to the race is over. Brian's pretty pissed off.
Right.
He holds a press conference announcing that he's going to sue Kevin Beckner for telling lies about him. And then during the press conference, he says, my campaign manager got outsmarted by Kevin's campaign manager. So the guy puts me over, which was brilliant.
Well, he's a great worker, right? He
Oh
put
my
you over,
God.
he did a job for you.
It was a beautiful thing. And then when he lost the lawsuit, I wrote a press release saying Kevin Beckner beats Brian Blair again.
Wow.
If I was a real smart ass, I would have said loser leaves town.
Right, yeah, loser leaves town. It's a great stipulation.
I
It's one of the
forgot
best.
it. But that was a significant race because everybody said there's no way Kevin's going to win this race. And Kevin, and by the way, there were a couple elected officials who most people knew were, you know, not being honest about who they were and who said off the record, I would never do that. He's going to get killed. And so Kevin did win. And then that actually changed so many things. Frankly, in Florida, because back then, you know, if you were gay, you couldn't adopt a kid.
Sure,
it was that, you know, that kind of crap. And so after Kevin, there were others that did, that stepped up to run as, open individuals. And over in St. Pete, there are either 3 or 4 current city council members who are openly gay. Things like that. But interesting enough, when Kevin did go into office, you know, us liberal Democrats, were fiscally irresponsible. Kevin did more fiscally responsible moves than not just the local Republicans in the county commission, but at the state level. He was able to attack insurance fraud, car insurance fraud, and was able to make something happen in Hillsborough County that nobody in Tallahassee could handle. And then the very first meeting he went to, this is brilliant. Everybody said to Kevin, look, you're young, this is your first meeting. Just go there, watch how things work, and don't really say anything. So they were about to do, they call it a consent agenda vote. And what that is, like layman's terms, and I'm a layman, so I'm explaining it the best way I know, is they get a book with a whole bunch of issues all in one book. and they're going to vote up or down on everything in that book.
Yeah.
So just before they're about to vote up or down on it, he goes, excuse me, I have a question. And he goes, on page whatever it was, there's a $2 million expenditure for the supervisor of election, and I don't know what that's for. And so he pulled that out. Interestingly enough, that supervisor election was just about to leave in shame. And so he caught, buried in this consent agenda, a $2 million expenditure that was literally going to steal money from the county and wind up in that guy's pocket one way or the other.
Wow.
And so they had to pull that out and vote that down, of course, right? So the liberal Democrat saved the county $2 million on his very first meeting. So after that meeting, somebody said to Kevin, well, how did you find that? He's like, well, I read it. And he's like, what do you mean you read it? You read the book? Yeah, that's what I do. He read the entire
How'd you find that, boy? What the heck?
What the heck? And so the very, very first meeting, when everybody told him to just sit back, be a good boy, right?
Yeah.
He saved the county $2 million first day in office. So the moral of this story is that some of us could give a crap about whether or not, when people say that it's an impossible race or you can't win, all those other things.
Yeah.
Some of us are very stubborn and call BS on that. I won't say the full word because this is a kid's show. But these things happen, and they happen we're around kids. and so these things happen. And so Daniel Smith, I believe, can beat that guy.
Yeah.
Because that guy, because in my opinion on campaigns, it's not, there's many factors that play into being successful in a campaign. Right. One of them is having a good candidate. One of them is timing. One of them is who your opponent is, right? Brian Blair was the perfect opponent at that time. And, one of Brian's mistakes was they believed what everybody else was telling us.
Right.
There's no way that this guy could win that race. I'm not going to worry about it.
Do you think Daryl's that confident at this point? I mean, he doesn't seem to be doing much to...
He's certainly not doing any campaigning.
Right.
He just dropped what, every elected official has the ability to send a newsletter out to their district to tell them about all the great things they're doing. What's very interesting is and this is the guy who says, I'm not raising a tax and I'm the fiscally responsible. I'm going to be that voice for fiscal responsibility. You're in printing. You're in publishing.
Yeah.
You know how expensive things are.
Absolutely.
He just sent out an 8-page, fully glossy piece of letter to the district.
Done for you and to you.
Well, I haven't been maybe it's in micro, like tiny font, letting people know that taxpayers paid for this. Glossy, super high glossy.
Wow.
Nobody's going to read it, but he spent the money, taxpayer money, to push and promote his own agenda and also do his fair share of campaigning because there's an awful lot of bashing on that.
That might be more egregious than when former Pittsburgh Mayor Luke Ravenstahl put his name on all the garbage cans prior to an election. I think it was, I don't even know what went behind that decision, but it was one of those things that was just, it's obvious what it is. And so it's you could sit here again. And knowing Daryl, he would probably say, well, who knows? I mean, maybe it was, but if it was, he'd probably be the first person to admit it, given that I think he believes he's unbeatable more than anyone else thinks he's unbeatable. And I think that could be what you need.
Look, when candidates do that, it's at their own detriment because especially when you see the spirited kind of campaign that's going on up there and we're not hiding. We're out there publicly. You're seeing the social action on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. People are paying attention to this race.
Right.
People are showing up to this race. And for all of those people, even if they're the non-Daryls of the world, but other people that look at, historically, this district, Well, Connor Lamb just won a district that was over 20%, Republican performing district, and he won that race. So if you have the right candidate and you have the right mood of the electorate, and I don't know, call me crazy, but I'm guessing that a lot of people, especially in that district, 20 years is that's beyond
That's
a
a
career
long time.
politician. He's
Yeah.
been in office for 20 bloody years. And so just giving that, some people are like, you know what? Let's give another guy a try.
Yeah.
And never mind the fact that, oh, by the way, he hasn't brought money back to the
Right.
district because he doesn't think he should.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to question what the biggest problem in that district is, I mean, go and drive to Cranberry and try and on a Friday night at 5:00, whatever, and try and go to a movie or go to dinner on freedom. You can't do it. I mean, traffic is. I mean, it's one of the. It's a heavy populated with businesses and I mean corporations. There are a lot of corporate entities have their headquarters out there. There are a lot of workers out there. That's sort of where all the shopping and entertainment is out in that corridor, and you literally can't get to it in a speedy fashion on most evenings. It's just
Right. And
it's
you know,
horrible.
like
and he's had a long time to fix that. That road hasn't been a problem overnight. It's been
it's been
standing
many years.
problem. Yeah.
And by the way, he has been on the record saying that this is just a pet project for the
Right.
local county councils and all this other stuff. And he said at meetings that volunteers should pay for this.
Right.
And oh, by the way, the other thing that he doesn't want to do for his district is he doesn't believe that the state should supply resources so that the local first responders, i.e. the firefighters
Right.
and all that, should get upgraded equipment. His comments on that is volunteers should pay
Yeah.
for that. And so, here's the guy who has the ability. He's in leadership, right? Most representatives, they need to deliver to their constituents,
Right.
And he won't do it.
Yeah, I think that every suburbanite has the constitutional God-given right to go to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the Steelers game on Sunday, but you can't get there because of the damn road.
And you missed the kickoff.
You do. You missed the kickoff. You missed the drink specials. You missed the whole schmear. Mitch Cates, I know we're running a little long on your time, but one thing I definitely want to talk to you about, and
Yes.
I want to have you back, because we're also our Pittsburgh Current. You can find us on our socials at PGH Current. Our next issue hits the streets on September 25th, and on October 23rd will be our very special election issue, which I'm sure we'll be talking about some of these stories and more. But one of the things, and there are other races I wanted to talk about, one of the things I want to make sure we talk about, because I think it's a very important service. You've developed, I think big, you guys have developed a site called votelocalpa.com.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that and how it can help voters and candidates as they prepare for the November election.
So one of the things that my partner Craig Rell and I, we worked on this when we were at the party. I actually started building this when I worked down in Florida. I'm a big believer that all politics is local. Hey, I'm a Boston guy,
Right.
and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but Tip O'Neill,
Tom Brady sucks.
Tip O'Neill. Hey, did I warn you? I have a chair. I have a
You
chair.
know what? To defend the honor, Tom, you can hit me with a chair. You can. I'll blade if you hit me with a chair. I'm sorry.
I'll gig you right here
I'll
in
gig,
front of this audience.
Please do. I know where you hide your blades. So I don't want that. Infections could. Anyway, sorry.
So,
votepa.com.
like most of the campaigns I've worked on in my political career have been local campaigns. I've done some really cool, high profile ones too,
Yeah.
but the local ones like Kevin's
Right.
were local elections that affected people's lives. So, being a believer and an advocate of that, we built this program called Vote Local PA, and that program was to make sure that, number one, there are 67 counties in Pennsylvania, not just 12 or 13. And there are candidates that are running for office in all of these counties. So we wanted to make sure that voters had the ability to find information about every single candidate on the ballot, from the top of the ticket down to the local level. And on this website, a voter could go in there, type in their home address, and it will give them their slate. It will also tell them where they can vote, their polling location, and it'll also give them the ability that we can send them a text reminder, hey, by the way, here's your slate.
Right.
The other thing that this website does, which, we're field guys, if anything else. Even my partner, who's a big digital head, he's educated engineer. He was on Bernie's national digital team, but we're both field guys. So we felt it was very important that we were able to provide activists, be it counties, committees, or activists on the ground, literature, so that when they go door to door talking about their candidates, hey, by the way, here's all the candidates that you're going to be, have an opportunity to vote for.
Right.
So we have the ability, and we've been doing it we launched the site about, a month and a half ago, and we're getting orders almost daily from different parts of the state saying, hey, can we have a, or slate card for this county and this area? And we do it all the way down to like to the last race on the ballot. In this election cycle, it's state representative. And so now people are going door to door, and they're being able to provide information for voters to find out, oh, these are the people that I could vote for.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, here's a link. Go to that link, and you can learn more about any one of these candidates.
And it's amazing how hard it is to find all that information in one place. I mean, even to find a sample ballot, you can't just do a quick search. So it's really great to have a one-stop where you can go and you can look at this. And then, if you want to learn about, and honestly, I think it's important to learn about the opponents of some of these of candidates as well. And, you put in the name. I mean, if you want to know about Bob Casey's opponent, I'm not sure who that is.
He's on a bus tour
Yeah.
somewhere. I think he's in a rock band because he's on a tour bus.
Yeah, tour bus.
But on the website,
Yeah.
if you go to it, you'll see that we have every candidate listed, and for each candidate, there are hyperlinks to their websites, their Facebook pages, their Twitter accounts, their contribution pages,
Right.
so that people, it's literally a click of a button,
Yeah.
can get them more information than practically anywhere. So we're proud of it. Other states are calling about we're rolling out in other states. But it's something that we've been building this for a couple of years, and we just kind of birthed that baby. and for the last couple of years, when I was the political director for the party, I had this T-shirt that I made. It was one of them, and it had the logo, Vote Local PA. And people were like, where can I get that shirt? And so now they can, because we have it. We have a shop on the page, and people are like they're starting to get them now.
Right.
And I'm starting to see people sporting them on Facebook.
Where can we get the Jason the Terrible merch? That's what we need to know.
I'll have to add another button to that page.
And when you drive around on Halloween and you see people like dressed as Jason from the movie, do you like to pretend that, oh, look, they're dressed as me for Halloween? Is that like a boost, and you go boost?
All right,
you, or?
This is no lie.
Okay, go ahead.
And my wife will cringe. She does cringe, and my kids are like, uh-oh. I put on the gimmick.
Do you?
On Halloween, because there is no greater holiday than Halloween. And so where I live, there's some shrubbery, and it's kind of dark. And so I'm a big kid, guys.
Right.
I hide in the shrubbery and then come out. I've been doing it for years. When I used to live in Highland Park,
right,
and my house was famous for, like, I would lie on the ground, making it look like I was a scarecrow, and kids would walk up, like the teenagers who shouldn't be trick or treating,
right,
And I will never forget this one. There was a group of kids, and I'm lying there, and this one kid said, "I killed you, Jason. I killed you." And then all of a sudden, I sat up, and that kid dropped his pillowcase full of candy, screamed, and ran down the street and never turned back.
It's like that kid never saw a movie before. Of course you're going to pop up.
Yeah,
Jeez.
so I warn you, if you come to my house, you are going to get greeted by a hockey masked killer.
Fantastic. And this man is running campaigns for some of the most influential Democrats in the state.
There you go. But there's other races, and I know that we're running long, and blah, blah, blah. But there's some other races that, if I may, just I'll mention them. I'll push people to look into them and read more about them. We're doing that congressional race down in Southwest PA, the new PA 14.
Right.
Our candidate is Bibiana Borio. She's running against some guy named Guy. Guy. And
who is a dude, I
think. Who's a dude.
He's a dude.
But it's a very, very interesting race, because that's a district with a lot of seniors and a lot of veterans and a lot of people that want jobs. And, our candidate is somebody, she worked her way up the food chain in a male-dominated industry, Ford Motor Company, started in the finance department, worked her way up to running the finance department, and then, unbelievably, she ran JAG. And so she is somebody who's literally created thousands of jobs versus a guy who hasn't created a job.
Right.
Never mind, he bounces from one job to the next.
Right.
And then the other thing that, I think is what makes this, people really need to pay attention to this race.
Yeah.
Is this guy who served believes that they should cut veteran benefits.
Right.
Said it on his own podcast,
Yeah.
which is remarkable. That they're, that it's a lazy. I don't want to misquote it,
Right.
But the guy did say that retired service members, otherwise known as vets, shouldn't
Right.
take advantage of
Yeah.
veteran benefits.
Guy Rechtenstaller, I think is how you say that. But he is the type of candidate. He's the prime example of why you have to not just read what's out, but you have to dig into a candidate before you vote for them.
You have to pay attention.
There are some, and I appreciate you.
And I think that's a dangerous candidate.
Yeah.
Who wants to cut veteran benefits, and oh, by the way, he also wants to cut Social Security, and he'll be another rubber stamp for Trump getting rid of the healthcare system that we have, and so that's a problem. And then the other candidate that we're working on locally is a guy named Doug Hunt, who is like, he's our modern day Mr. Smith Goes to Washington kind of guy. He's a KML carpenter. The guy gets up at 5, 6, is on job site at 6 in the morning, works all day, clocks out at whatever time, and then he goes home and he's been knocking doors for months. And so here's a guy living it's a Westmoreland district. He's definitely running on union labor issues like family wages and, and the right to organize and those kind of very important. And the district that he lives in is a very big labor household district. There's a lot of union households that are in his district, and it has been trending Republican for a long time. But this is a guy who's knocking doors from all parties. He's nonpartisan about his approach, and he's running against a quiet incumbent, the opposite of Daryl Metcalfe.
Right.
But in his time in office and before that, he worked for a company that outsourced steel to China while working for a state project, so they got sued by the state. He's involved in union busting when somebody tried to organize with that company. Since he's been in office, he's taken anti-union votes. And this is why campaigns are important and he didn't have a challenger for the last 2 cycles.
Right.
So now you have a guy who's knocking on doors, telling them who he is, and also saying, hey, by the way, hey, fellow union members, this guy's not a friend of ours. So they're interesting campaign. Every one of these, by the way, that we're talking about, they're all very difficult races. People say, they question the, winnability, but it doesn't matter. Like anybody can win, the movie Any Given Sunday,
right?
Any Given Tuesday, anybody can win an election.
We sure learned the shit out of that, didn't we? I mean, we all lived that horror.
And that's happening the last couple of weeks we're seeing, this upset here, this upset there. So those are going to happen. This election cycle, there are going to be a lot of upsets. And upsets don't happen by themselves. You have to create the opportunity for those. And I believe that, I'm, knock on wood, working with some candidates who are absolutely creating those opportunities for upsets,
right,
and opening the eyes to voters and helping promote activism in the community, which is healthy for everybody.
Blue Wave is just not the name of a delicious raspberry vodka, folks. It's very, very possible, and I think on some level it's certainly likely. Before we let you go, favorite match that you ever competed in? Do you have one that pops right off the top of your head? Since we're in the hallowed ground of.
Oh my God, you're asking me to name my favorite child, which I can't do.
He actually has.
I love them all. Look, there's a couple. I'll give you some of the. I'll rattle off a couple.
Yeah.
When you get to wrestle Big John Studd, those are and I remember we were the Sunkiss Slam of the Night one Saturday night.
Wow.
Back during Saturday Night Main. But there was a guy that I used to wrestle. I was trained by Killer Kowalski.
Right.
And so one of the guys that we trained together was a guy named Chris Duffy. And he had a couple of different versions of his Chris Duffy, but he often did gorgeous Chris Duffy. Chris was a great bump taker. And when he and I went into the ring with each other, we were determined to make sure that when that audience left, they'll say, it's a bunch of bunk. But that match, that was real. I grew up wrestling. I've told you this.
Yeah.
I wrestled since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
watching TV the whole time. So my high school coach, my junior high school coaches hated that. My high school coaches hated that. My college coaches hated that. I'd be on Saturday morning and go, Coach, I got to go because, at 10 o'clock it's coming on. It drove them mad.
Yeah.
And then when I went into the business, I was kind of shocked at how many people didn't do that. Right. So anyways, I was a shooter for Walter Kowalski. And so when Chris and I went into the ring, it was a shoot. And we beat the crap out of each other. And one of those matches was, somebody asked me about this a couple weeks ago, a Texas bull rope match.
Yeah.
Where we were strapped at each end with a big cowbell in the middle. I was in pain for 2 weeks or more after that because we were potatoing the hell out of each other with that bell from the minute the bell rang. And local connection. This was in New York. This match happened in New York.
Yeah.
But Bruno was there because it was going to be a new startup, I think called the IWF, International Wrestling Federation. And it was in the late 80s-ish, right? And this was going to be a new, regional, and it was a combination of new talent and kind of like sunsetting, some of the guys coming near, like towards the end of their, careers, like the Nikolai Volkovs, and then guys like us, right? And so we did him. I was Jason. He was Gorgeous Chris Duffy. And Walter always trained us. You had to go 30 minutes or he'd fire you, right? And that's how I became Jason the Terrible.
Right, yeah.
I was wrestling as Killer Kowalski Jr. I was Mitch Kowalski wearing purple and gold, right? I love that gimmick.
Yeah.
And then I wrestled Jason the Terrible.
Right.
And at 10 minutes in, this Jason guy said, we have to go home. So I did the knee drop from the top, and we're over. And Walter was pissed off. And then the next, I showed up to the school or whatever a couple days later, and he's like, "That guy was a schlep. I had to fire him. I can't afford that shit." And he's like, "We have a new Jason." I'm like, "Who's that?" "You." And I'm like, "What?" Because like 2 weeks later was Friday the 13th. Jason was the main event. He needed a Jason. Enter Jason.
Wow.
But Chris and I did that bull rope match, which was brutal. And Bruno was ringside calling it, right?
Yeah.
And I met Bruno years later, and I reminded him of that match. I wrestled his son a couple of times too, David. But the other match Chris Duffy and I did, it was I swear to God, it was on like a racetrack in, I think it's Orleans, Long Island. It's like at the tip of Long Island. Huh. It was on a car racetrack, one of those shows at night. And it was Jason the Terrible versus Freddy Krueger. So Chris put on a Freddy Krueger outfit, right?
Wow.
In a steel cage.
Wow.
And so
Dream match.
We were beating the crap out of each other. And then we're both at the top of the cage and we're both straddling it, punching each other. And then I took his head and I slammed it down on the fence.
Yeah.
But you know how they hold those chain link fences together? They have that metal rod that kind of like threads through.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, it was sticking up about like that. Did not see that.
Wow.
So that hit him right in the head. So then I knocked him back in the ring, and you could see the blood coming. Now, Chris Duffy bleached his hair blonde.
Right.
He was kind of like New England's Dusty Rhodes. He was heavy and big blonde hair. Right. And so then I grabbed him and hung him upside down in the turnbuckle, looped his foot, and was, stomping him. So now all the blood's coming down. At that point, we unhook his foot. He gets up, and now he's lightheaded. Wow. He's like saying, "Oh, we got to go home." I ripped the mask. It was one of those Freddy Krueger rubber masks. Yeah. I grabbed it from the eyes and ripped it off of him. Wow. And by then, he's entirely covered in blood. It was beautiful. It was unbelievable. Yeah. People were screaming. It was crazy. And then we finished. That was he had a. Oh my God, did he have a gash in his head? Wow. It was unbelievable. But again, people would be like, those two guys beat the shit out of each other, and it was amazing.
That's amazing.
So those are some of the ones that like instantly pop in. But I wrestled the Hart Foundation. Yeah. How is that not cool?
That's great.
And God rest Jim Neidhart's soul. I was so sad to see that. But man, those guys, Brett was just a genius. So tough question, man.
Well, that's why I was struck out on my own to ask the hard questions. Mitch Case, thank you very much. I appreciate it, brother.
Hey,
appreciate
man,
it.
good to see you.
We got to have you back because I'm sure there are a lot more stories.
Oh,
where,
God, we
and
could go
maybe
on and on
you
and
might
on.
see him on another podcast if we could talk him into coming on.
Next time we'll get violent.
I appreciate that.
People
Yeah,
want
we can.
that.
We can set something up out in the street. Issue 4 of the Pittsburgh Current is on the streets. It's our fall guide issue. It's also last Friday, as I'm sure many of you know, Mac Miller, Pittsburgh's own Mac Miller, was found dead in his home, and it was. This is weird. I mean, I know that famous people die all the time, but people, but there's a connection with Mac and with Pittsburgh. But this, I think, affected a lot of us just in a really strong way, and I think everybody sort of feels a connection to Mac and his success. I never had the pleasure to interview Mac. However, I've interviewed probably 8, 10 other artists who say they owe their start in the business to Mac Miller, and that's the kind of person he was. He was always willing to help someone else out, especially local Pittsburgh artists. And certainly he was a guy with his demons, but Mac Miller was a great guy and he'll be missed by many. So we have our special tribute to Mac this week, and we're going to be having some more stuff online at pittsburghcurrent.com. Follow us on all of our socials at PGH Current. And happy birthday to our associate publisher, Bethany Rue. It's her birthday today, so if you see Bethany, buy her a drink because she's most likely in a bar. Just kidding, Bethany. Anyway, this has been the Pittsburgh Current podcast. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next week.